Thanks for this place is filled with all kinds of puns. All right. Senator, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. As you correctly noted, we're here to talk about lasers. But no, it's actually a very serious subject because, unfortunately, as we've seen with the riots across the country, some of the brigands and criminals are getting ever more creative in the harm that they can do to other people, including the use of lasers that can be purchased readily across the internet to cause eye injuries and other types of harm to law enforcement, to pilots, to our first responders, folks that are actually there trying to keep the public safe. In fact, I mean, if you just Google the term lasers and law enforcement, you'll see that in the Portland riots that occurred during 2020, there were over 113 serious eye injuries as a result of lasers that were being purchased on the internet. As the son of an ophthalmologist who's practiced for 37 years, eye safety is something that is very important for me. And when the Ophthalmological Association came to me and asked me to carry this bill, I was greatly honored to do so. Again, I think what Senate Bill 97 does is it adds the definition of laser to dangerous instruments so that when they are used against law enforcement and other folks with the intention to harm, that they can be appropriately prosecuted just like anybody that uses a rock, a club, or other deadly weapon. So, very simple bill. Dr. Ben Mackey, the president of the Kentucky Academy of Eye Physicians and Surgeons, had a short statement. It just says that the Kentucky Academy of Eye Physicians and Surgeons strongly supports this legislation, which makes it explicitly clear that using a laser to harm another person is illegal in the Commonwealth of Kentucky and can be prosecuted. Our physicians are increasingly seeing patients whose eyes have been harmed by the inappropriate use of lasers. We believe this legislation is a step forward for the General Assembly that they can take towards preventing those injuries. I would hope that my colleagues here would agree with me that as assault and other crimes evolve, that we can also appropriately craft the definition of our statutes to meet, increasing threats.
Actually have a committee substitute,
Yes,
is that right?
I apologize. Yes, there is a committee substitute.
Motion from Senator Schickel, second from Senator Berg. Any questions on the committee substitute? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting it, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Sub is adopted. Motion from Senator Schickel, second from Senator Deneen beat you that time. On the bill as amended by the sub, any other remarks, Senator?
No, sir.
Any questions? Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Berg,
Yes, thank you.
Senator Carroll,
I quickly explain.
Yes, sir.
This was concluded in the language that we've had the last few years on that anti-riot bill that we have not been able to get passed. I know that during those incidents, there were lasers that were used also. So I appreciate you bringing this forward, Senator. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Chairman.
Senator.
Senator Deneen, Senator Neal, Senator Schickel, Senator Stivers, Senator Storm, Senator Turner, Senator Wheeler,
Aye.
Chairman Westerfield.
Aye. Bill passes with favorable expression. Thank you, Senator. Unfortunately, we're going to have to pass over Senate Bill 120. I had some people raise some objections. Just kidding, y'all. Been waiting for that for a week. As my phone explodes. All right. Senator, you have the floor. Please have your guest introduce himself.
Yes, Senator Philip Wheeler, 31st District.
Good morning. My name is Richard Horning.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 120 is a Planned Community Act. I'm presenting this bill today to carry on the legacy of our former colleague, Senator Ralph Alvarado. I would note that Ralph brought this bill for the past 4 years and could never get an agreement of the interested parties to get it passed. Looks like it took Ralph moving to Tennessee to get something done on this matter. Well, all kidding aside, I want to thank Senator Alvarado for his leadership on this issue. I think had it not been for his efforts, that we wouldn't be where we are here today. This is a compromise bill with all the interested parties in agreement: the bankers, the realtors, the home builders, and the homeowners association. As with all good compromises, nobody is getting everything they want, but I did reach out to Ralph. I shared the language of this bill with him. He's very supportive of this bill, and he's very glad to see that the parties working together to get something done. A couple of points I'd like to make about Senate Bill 120. This issue has been well vetted. As has been stated, we've been discussing this for the last 4 years. Senator Alvarado brought this issue before the interim Judiciary Committee back in November, and as I stated before, previous versions have been vetted multiple times. Senate Bill 120 provides a statutory framework for homeowners associations that will allow them to better function and self-govern. In addition, the bill has significant consumer protections for its members of the homeowners association and provides greater transparency. For example, in previous testimony on this bill, we heard about situations where homeowners associations like the golf course community in Mount Sterling that had poor documents and didn't provide for financial transparency. Ultimately, the developer absconded with the dues. The homeowners association had no ability to collect dues necessary to maintain the infrastructure of the golf course. It is now defunct, and the homeowners association members have lost the value on their property. Senate Bill 120 allows homeowners associations to set fees at appropriate levels to fulfill their maintenance obligations. It provides for financial transparency and financial audit provisions. It also enforces fee collection and compliance with deed restrictions. I'll be glad to entertain any.
We got a motion on the bill from Senator Schickel. I'll make the second. I know I don't want to interrupt your remarks. Does anybody have any questions on the bill? Yeah, Senator Schickel.
Yes, Senator Schickel.
I just have a comment, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
You may.
I got constituents on both sides of this issue, and here lately, last year or so, on the side of the homeowners, very much so. So I'm really glad that we have this bill, and I want to thank you for putting it together, because I've been receiving a lot of traffic on it, especially the last couple of years.
Thank you, Senator Schickel.
Anybody else have any questions? I don't want to cut your comments short. Did you say, Senator Berg, did you have a question?
I do, sir.
You may.
And this is basically a holdover from last year. I just want to make sure, as I'm reading through this, that this is clarified. Some of the concerns last year was that the developers were getting a free pass. I mean, they were selling properties to buyers with a vision that they had no intention of completing, and leaving basically the homeowners associations responsible for what I would think is, false advertising, and that the developers are the people that are responsible for making sure that they have met their commitments to the homeowners. Is that codified at this point, or does this bill still leave that question pending?
What this bill does, and again, this is a compromise bill, and as a compromise, it does not go as far as what Senator Alvarado's bill went. But what it does do is it provides a basic statutory framework wherein if a homeowners association does not have an operative document that is being complied with, it provides a statutory backup that sets standards as to what a homeowners association going forward should adhere to. And this is a consumer protection bill. I mean, like I said, when I heard Ralph's testimony about the golf course community in Mount Sterling, I mean, I was horrified. I mean, the fact that someone would abscond with several $100,000 down to Florida, and these people are left holding the bag. A lot of these people have mortgages. A lot of people put their life's investment in a
Life
home.
savings.
And so, this bill is basically about putting some basic provisions that I think we can all agree that need to be in these documents so that these communities can thrive in a way that I think is intended, and to provide a standard to hold the bad actors to account.
If I may add, Senator
Yes,
Berg,
yes.
Richard Horning again. I'm a practicing attorney in Louisville. For any of you that haven't heard from me before, represent over 600 communities over the years. typically in those kinds of scenarios, we have found that's a contractual remedy that we find, assuming what you are intimating as far as the background on a developer promise. Typically, if that's not in the contract or it's not something mandated and approved as part of the approved development plan and the zoning agencies, typically there's remedies to the residents for that, and we've actually had cases like that. So as Senator Wheeler alluded, we really didn't probably get that legislation that far into this piece of legislation due to the negotiation process.
So it has been removed.
It was that piece has never been in the bill to my knowledge. As far as required developer responsibility as far as improvements.
But it did seem like the bill was basically going to take that responsibility and put it on the homeowners associations as opposed to the developers and the builders.
I don't believe that's in this legislation.
We're clear 100%. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Senator Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And mine's more of a question. My problem with Alvarado's bill, it would allow one individual to basically undo an association, and I understand that subsection 2 of this clarifies that, so that all those documents they have that are in place now that association's got to follow, that it's group controlled, are going to stay in effect, and that issue is no longer. I just want that out for the public because that was an issue that people were calling me about. And I
Yes.
think that's clarified in section 2 there.
Yes, this establishes a framework going forward.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr.
Seeing no, Chair. One more, Senator Shepherd, quickly.
Thank you. This is for your guest, Senator Wheeler. Question. When you say you represent communities, do you represent the developers or do you represent the homeowners?
Homeowner typically. I have in the past represented a few developers, but probably 95+% of my representations are post-developer control
Thank you.
communities.
We've got a motion and a second on the bill. Unless you want to proceed with anything else, I'm going to get the vote going here. Madam Secretary.
Senator Berg,
Aye.
Senator Carroll,
Aye.
Senator Deneen, Senator Neal, Senator Schickel, Senator Stivers, Senator Storm, Senator Turner, Senator Wheeler,
Aye.
Chairman Westerfield.
Aye. How about that? Bill passes with favorable expression unanimously. I want to commend all the parties, all of you, for working and finding some common ground. I think, Senator, you were right that not everybody got what they wanted, but that's sometimes the art of compromise. That's what that means. And now you've got a bill that just passed unanimously that never could get past committee or couldn't get from the committee to the floor.
Well, you know, I like I said, it's amazing what moving Ralph 300 miles away can get done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
He's probably watching the live stream right now. All right. Senator Howell, I'm going to take yours up next, if that's okay, since Senator Deneen is a captive audience as a member of the committee. So come on up. Senate Bill 126, an act relating to venue and declaring an emergency. Senator, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for your deference, Senator Deneen. And I just wanted to note that apparently Senator Wheeler is the man that can get things done. Between bringing this and the library bill, he is the person to take things over the edge when apparently nobody else can. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Senate Bill 126. It's a simple cleanup in addition to the bill we passed last year about jurisdiction for constitutional cases. As y'all will recall, that bill allowed someone who was going to make a constitutional challenge in the narrowly defined areas to bring a case in the jurisdiction in which they lived rather than in Franklin. And this is kind of the other side of that. This allows either party to have one change of venue if they so choose. But the change in venue is done by random selection. It funnels through to the clerk of the Supreme Court, and they choose an alternate venue by random selection. So that's the gist of the bill. I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Senator Berg.
Thank you, sir. My one question when I was reading over this, how do we assure that the random selection process stays completely random?
We trust the clerk of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure who we would appeal that to.
Trust issue?
The clerk is to set up a process for
All
random
right.
selection.
In medicine, we trust
Are
and then
you trying to
verify.
back? Are you trying to back into election challenges there, Senator?
No, I just want to make sure that our random selection process is indeed unequivocally randomized.
Yes.
So thank you.
Got a motion from Senator Turner and a second from, I heard Deneen first. Any other questions? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Berg,
Aye.
Senator Carroll,
Aye.
Senator Deneen, Senator Neal, Senator Schickel, Senator Stivers, Senator Storm, Senator Turner, Senator Wheeler,
Aye.
Chairman Westerfield.
Aye, bill passes with favorable expression, unanimous. Once again, I'll note for the record, since I didn't before, that Senate Bill 97 passed unanimously. All right, Senator Deneen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. I hope everybody's got their tough questions for the freshmen. All right, Senator, Senate Bill 119, an act relating to sex offenses. And members, you've got a committee substitute in your folder. I'll direct your attention to that. Good to see you, Ms. Rochelle. Does everybody have the sub? There was a small change in there. Senator, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. I'd like to introduce my guest. I have with me Carolyn Rochelle with the Children's Advocacy Center of Kentucky, and Meg Savage, the Chief Legal Officer for the Kentucky Coalition Against Domestic Violence. As many of you know, Kentucky continues to rank poorly in the field of domestic violence, and in many cases that is also involving sexual abuse or those types of trauma. So,
Senator, if I can ask you to pull your mic up just a little bit.
I want to get into the bill. Senate Bill 119 simply clarifies the language of sexual contact and removes definition of sexual abuse. So I want to get into what it does do. The bill amends the definition of sexual contact in KRS 510.010. It removes the term sexual abuse from the DVO statute found in KRS 403.720, and it adds the term sexual assault to KRS 403.720 and defines it in definition in the section of 403.720. We looked at how this came about. Was a constituent of mine in my district was involved in a sexual assault case, and through that, they asked me to look into the wording of how we defined these terms in the law. And I contacted a family court judge in my district and asked them if they saw issues with how we had defined sexual assault and sexual abuse. And again, they did refer me to a court of appeals case, Castle versus Castle, and it assumed that the term sexual abuse in this section only referred to the crime of sex abuse. However, if you compare DVOs and IPOs, you can see in KRS Chapter 456 that the General Assembly used a different term, sexual assault, and then stated that it referred to sex crimes in KRS Chapter 510 and incest in KRS Chapter 530. So there seemed to be some confusion, I guess, on the clarity of how these terms were defined. In the course of creating this bill, we looked at best practices and how the state of Michigan and the state of Wisconsin define these terms, and I believe even the state of Arizona, to get some clarity. This bill avoids having two different definitions for sexual abuse. It broadens the term sexual contact so it is less ambiguous and better captures what sexual contact really is. This will help both child and adult victims of this type of behavior. It brings the DVO statutes in line with the IPO statutes and uses uniform language. Sexual assault will be defined the same way in both sets of statutes. By adding sexual assault to the DVO statute and defining it and deleting the term sexual abuse, it clarifies that the behavior of which a DVO could be granted is far more broad than just sexual abuse. As defined in the criminal code, because it has never been defined in the DVO statutes, has caused some confusion. We believe that this will aid judges in protective order cases and juries in criminal cases to better identify what is and what is not sexual contact, regardless of the age of the victim. So I believe that this is really just clearing up some murky waters on definitions as it relates to sexual assaults.
I'm going to take that, gentlemen, as a motion and second on the committee sub, if that's all right.
Motion on the sub.
All those in favor of adopting the sub, please vote by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, the sub's before us. Ms. Savage, Ms. Rochelle, if you have remarks, you're free to share them now.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go first. Am I on there?
Yeah.
Here we go. Okay. So again, I'm Caroline Rochelle. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at the Children's Advocacy Centers of Kentucky. I think a lot of you know who we are, but we serve 7,500 plus children a year. There are 15 children's advocacy centers, one in every area development district. We provide forensic interviews, mental health services, medical exams, advocacy, and more services for child victims and their families. The majority of the cases that we see are child sexual abuse cases. And the component of the bill that I think I can speak to the most is the aspect of sexual contact. And the issue that we are concerned about is where the law currently states that sexual gratification is required to show sexual contact. And there are a couple challenges with that from our perspective. And the first one is that we don't always know why a perpetrator abuses a child. The research shows that there could be sexual gratification, or there could be other reasons like humiliation or power or other intent. We may never know the intent behind why someone abuses a child. So that's one issue. The other issue is the majority of our children that we see are ages 12 and under. And so the way this plays out is maybe a young child, 5 or 6 years old, comes into a center. They're interviewed by one of our interview specialists. And in order to try to document sexual gratification, an interviewer may ask sort of sensory type questions, were there noises that you heard? Were there, that kind of thing? But you can imagine it's very difficult for a child or anyone to articulate that there was sexual gratification on the part of their perpetrator. And so that's the other challenge with this and why we're supportive of legislation that removes that requirement. We appreciate Senator Deneen taking up this issue and your all's consideration.
Again, I'm Meg Savage, Chief Legal Officer with the Kentucky Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So I'll speak more to Section 1 of the bill, which refines the definitions under the KRS 403-700 series, which is our process for obtaining a domestic violence order. And just quickly, of course, in Kentucky, there are basically 2 types of protective orders, the domestic violence orders and the interpersonal protective orders. The DVO has been around since the early 1990s, and then the IPOs came online in 2016, I believe. And so those series of statutes very closely mimic one another, but there are some differences. And the case that Senator Deneen has already mentioned, Castle versus Castle, which I think was a 2018 or 2019 case, it showed that there was, perhaps a need for some clarity and bringing some parity between the two series of statutes, especially when it comes to specifically any sort of sexual violence that is going on. And so, it goes without saying that sexual violence can be part of a domestic violence situation. In fact, it's a lethality indicator. And also, our DVO statutes cover the parent-child relationship, step-parent, step-child relationship as well. And so people who are experiencing that type of violence within that family setting would go to court, and they would be looking at getting a domestic violence order, not an interpersonal protective order. So by bringing the definitions in line with both sets of statutes, we hope that that will give clarity to judges, practitioners, survivors, and anybody who is wondering, like, what type of a protective order do I need? What type of protective order is going to be entered? What needs to be proven during that hearing, etc. So again, we also thank Senator Deneen for bringing this issue forward. Very grateful to him and grateful that he reached out to us and solicited our input, which we did give. And if there are any questions about Section 1 of the bill, I'd be happy to answer them.
Members, are there any questions? Senator, okay, thank you. We've got a motion from Senator Schickel on the bill as amended and a second from Senator Wheeler on the bill as amended by the sub. Senator Berg?
Thank you, sir. As I briefly let you know beforehand, this is really more of a question, but on page 3, line 25, after the word manner, I think we need the word including, because I feel like the language as it is may actually remove sexual gratification from what falls under sexual contact, because it's not always for exacting revenge, humiliation, or punishment. Sometimes it is actually for sexual gratification, and I just want to make sure we include that.
Thank you for your question, Senator. I think if you look up above that in line 24, you will find that it says, for the person as being for the purpose of sexual arousal or gratification. So that is still in there. And it says done for sexual purpose or in a sexual manner for the purpose of. And then it lists those things. But I do appreciate that wording addition, that we could add that including.
Seeing no other questions, we've got a motion and a second on the bill as amended by the sub. Madam Secretary.
Senator Berg,
Thank you, and I vote aye.
Senator Carroll,
Aye.
Senator Deneen,
Aye.
Senator Neal, Senator Schickel, Senator Stivers, Senator Storm, Senator Turner, Senator Wheeler,
Aye.
Chairman Westerfield.
Aye. Bill passes with favorable expression, unanimous once again. I don't know that might be unprecedented. 4 bills, 4 unanimous votes. That trend will break anytime now. I appreciate it. Thank you, ladies, for your input on the bill. Senator, thanks for bringing it forward. Seeing no other business to come before this committee, astonishingly. Thank you, Senator. Imagine if you'd been on time. We could have started. We stand adjourned.